sorry if you hear any background noise. It's probably my son yelling mommy. But here we go. So I watched the movie Julie and Julia, and I entitled this A Tale of Two Foodies because that's exactly what this is. Julie Powell is in search of something to focus on and something that will show her who she truly is. She's surrounded by successful people, and she thought at once that she was going to be successful. So now she needs a focus. And Julia basically feels the same way. At one point, she was a working woman, and she needed something that was of interest. And she realized that food is what was going to bring that out for her. And she decided that she was going to take classes at Le Cordon Bleu in France. There are so many themes throughout the movie, but memoir is definitely one of the bigger themes, and it definitely tells a story of two women who one is living through the life of another and the other one is just discovering who she is and is trying to find her way in the world and what is meaningful to her. And Julia proclaims in one of the best parts of the film, which is in the beginning when she sits down with her husband to have a meal at a French restaurant, and she proclaims that French people eat French food. And you can tell that this is beginning to open up a whole new world for her in her story, even though she had already lived, I think they said into her 40s at this point, that she was beginning to open up a whole new world and begin her story again through food. And she does this by creating a challenge for herself. She wants to take the French cookbook and turn it into an Americanized version. So she wants to leave all the traditional food, but make it so that way it's an American text, so Americans can then bring that culture to them and in their kitchen for the servantless American cook. And Julie, at this point in her life, is feeling like she's not successful. She feels like she's never completed anything in her life to the full extent. Like she began a book, but was never able to truly finish it. And Julia Childs inspired her to create a challenge and to feel a success of finishing something. And The Art of French Cooking, which is Julia Child's book, gives that to her. She sets a goal of, okay, I have a year and I'm going to do over 500 recipes within that year. And she risks everything for it. Literally her marriage, her job, and just her sanity. And I believe that the theme memoir kind of speaks volumes to both these women because it does. It tells their story, and Julie uses it as just sort of the transportation to her own story and shows what she can do and create her own life through Julia Childs. Another theme that is really prevalent throughout the film is food and identity. Julia goes into a classroom that is full of men, and of course she's on her way of searching for herself, finding an interest, and thinking that she's going to be able to conquer the room and just take over. But what she realizes is that she's a little far behind and that she needs to play catch up because these are all men that have been introduced and have been taking this class for a while. One of the cute scenes in the movie shows her in the kitchen and she's chopping onions and she has this pile of onions and she basically says, like, I need to keep doing this, and yes, it's competitive, but I want to be good and I want to show them that I can do better, if better than they can. And she shows her determination, and through this she finds her identity, that she is fearless, which is also something that she continues to say throughout the film, that cooking made her fearless. And she then goes on, and through a great amount of blood, sweat, and tears, she develops The Art of French Cooking, this cookbook, with two of her friends, and follows through and gives a great amount of energy to this book and finds her identity and finds that she is in love with this culture and finds that she very much so wants to make it and continue to make it part of her life. Julie, on the other hand, throughout the film, is still trying to figure out how she fits in the world. And she's trying to figure out how her life was so unsuccessful. She's a bureaucrat. She's working during the 9/11 era, and she's trying to console and help those who have lived through this time. But she's not finding that she's making much of an impact and feels that her identity is slowly being swallowed up by this world. And she needs to find something that will kind of bring back her identity and make her who she is. She's a writer and she loves cooking. So she decides, and she and her husband both decide, that she's going to develop this blog and challenge herself. And through this challenge, she finds that she too is fearless and that she can complete something and that her life can have meaning. And she finds that through, again, Julia Childs and the fact that created this whole new world for her and followed through. So I included in this PowerPoint a clip of Julia Childs and Le Cordon Bleu, and this shows her determination and also shows kind of the gender theme about how the professors at the time weren't really women, they were men, and the men also conquered the kitchen over in France, and they were the ones that created the food, and they were the ones that got all the credit, and Julia Childs was very determined to prove them wrong. And this is the clip. So just quickly, I took A Day of Honey and Julie and Julia and compared the two of them and found quite a few similarities. That they both are memoirs. They both tell their story through food and their daily survival. And they both show hard work and determination and fearlessness. They all have times in their lives that they are struggling with and trying to work through, and food does that for each and every one of them. They, whether it's A Day in Honey and she's being taught the old recipes that define her culture, or Julie and Julia who are helping Americans and themselves define themselves through the art of French cuisine. They both kind of travel through time and are on kind of the route of self-discovery. And although one is based around war and strife, they both tell a tale of food. I truly love this movie. This is a very playful movie and it's entertaining, all while telling the story of these two ladies. It shows just how big an impact food has on everyday lives and the connections that are made and the hills that they need to climb and the success of what may seem impossible at the time, but they're able to prove themselves wrong and everybody else around them. And in the process, of course, Julie at the end of the movie says in the process she found joy, and I felt like that spoke to the movie because I think that that was basically what the movie was about, of finding themselves and finding what made them happy. And I think that major themes throughout the story were, of course, memoir, identity, and gender. They defied Julia especially defied gender norms over in France, and she conquered the room, and she was able to develop a book and bring culture, new culture to the American public and put it into their kitchens, and she made this whole world around it. She had a television show, other numerous books, and the woman was basically a superstar in the cooking industry. And as well as Julie, she was able to develop a life from it. She was able to, not only did she finish her blog, but she also wrote a book about her and Julie's travels through time. I would recommend this this film, sorry, just because of how light it is and the importance of food and culture and everyday life and the joy that it can bring.